today I went to see a movie that was essentially a love story, chick flick, you could say. Now, this is absolutely 100% not the kind of movie that I would normally be bothered about going to the cinema to see, but it was called Tulip Fever, and I'll tell you why I went to see it and what I thought of it. So, the reason I went to see it was because I had recently just heard of this thing called Tulip Mania. And another reason why I went to see it is because it just so happened to fit in with the other movies that I was trying to see that day. And I actually quite enjoyed it. So, the story itself, like I say, is a love story. And normally I'd expect to be like, fingers down your throat, spew. No, it wasn't. It wasn't like that at all. It was set in like the 1700s, if I'm not mistaken, in Amsterdam. Obviously, it was in English. It wasn't subtitled or anything. And it was a love story, but it wasn't just one couple. There was a couple of couples, and I found myself quite sold and quite involved emotionally with both couples' relationship. You know, it wasn't too sickly lovey-dovey. It was actually quite good. It was an enjoyable storyline, and it had some nice history to it as well, because, like I say, the 1700s in Amsterdam, in Holland, you know, you get to see what times were potentially like back then. I'm quite interested in history now. The older I get, the more I find I'm interested in the past, which is weird. So from that point of view, from a historical point of view, I found it very interesting. And the love story was very much what the film was about, but I got a lot of kicks from the Tulip Mania side of the story. So, to discuss that a little bit, you have quite possibly never heard of it. I'd never heard of it until last year. And the only reason why I've heard of it is because I got involved with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And during 2017, the price of Bitcoin 20x'd. So that means it went up 20 times. It started the year at $1,000, and by the end of the year, it was $20,000. That's incredible. And everyone was comparing to previous historic bubbles. The dot-com bubble, people will be more familiar with. This was when the internet took off, and all of a sudden any website was, you know, all of a sudden getting funding, and people were investing in domain names, and like I say, everything was just going crazy. And then all of a sudden it crashed. That was around about 1999, 2000. That was the dot-com bubble. Most people have heard of that, remember it, probably weren't involved with it, but remember it because it was recent. But the other bubble that I was hearing about was this Tulip Mania. And the first time I thought was tulip. Well, what do you mean by tulip? Because surely you can't mean the flower. And sure enough, it was. It was people back in the 1700s in Holland, in Amsterdam, investing in tulip bulbs, essentially, literally flowers. That is as crazy as it sounds. And people were comparing Bitcoin to the Tulip Mania. They're saying, you know, Bitcoin's not worth anything. It's just an imaginary asset. You know, you can't touch it, you can't feel it. People are crazy for investing in it, just like they were crazy for investing in tulips back in the 1700s. And to be honest, I can totally understand why people would be crazy to invest in tulips, because I just don't get it. It's like, what is it? It's a flower that's one day going to die, whereas Bitcoin is something completely else. I'm not going to get into that, but anyway, so Bitcoin, finances and economy is a big part of my life. So the reason why I wanted to go to this movie was to learn more about the Tulip Mania. Okay, so my phone just totally face planted there. Now, up until then, I was actually thinking that this new stand that I got for my phone was amazing, but we won't go into that. Anyway, back to the review. So, I was very interested to find out just what was this Tulip Mania all about. and the movie very much touched on it. You know, went into great detail, not real historical, factual, you know, detail, but enough to really have me quite fascinated by what I was hearing. So, you know, I got kicks out of the movie for the Tulip Mania side of things, and also, in all fairness, the love story. It was really quite good. The way the story developed, I didn't really know much about what was supposed to happen, and quite frankly, you know, I hadn't seen the trailer. It was purely the name Tulip Fever that made me want to go and see it, and yeah, I wasn't disappointed. The movie didn't drag. I mean, I'd have to give it's easily a 7.3 out of 10, I would suggest. Yeah, it was decent. 7.3 out of 10. Like I say, I got my kicks out of it mainly for the Tulip Mania educational side of things, but the love story didn't at all bore me. The main character in it, the older guy, absolutely brilliant. He's out of Django. He's the kind of German character out of Django, and he's a very likable character in this as well. So I think he very much made the film. The other characters also played a very good part, but I particularly do like the actor, so he made it enjoyable for me. And overall, the story developed in a way that I wasn't necessarily expecting. Obviously, times are very different in the 1700s. You've got quite elderly gentlemen married to ridiculously young people, but obviously back then, I mean, at first you're like, oh my god, this is gross, but then you kind of realise, oh, okay, so it's just the norm back then, and they pull it off in a non-seedy way. They, you know, you're not like watching it cringing sort of thing. It's a kind of movie you could have probably watched with your parents. Well, there are some sex scenes in it where you'd probably feel quite uncomfortable if you're anything like me, watching it with your parents, but the scenes with the elderly gentleman and the younger lady, they were done tastefully, and they were done quite well, so kudos for that. But it was very interesting indeed to essentially learn and see just how different things were back in the 1700s, that's for sure. And like I say, I'm going to talk briefly about the Tulip Mania side of things, because there may be other people that are wanting to watch the film for that exact reason, having heard recently maybe what just Tulip Mania is all about. So what I liked about the movie is it does some real world examples where a guy will buy a tulip at X price, and you will actually find out how much he sells it for. So that's pretty cool. You get to actually, you know, hear the numbers behind the trade to see just how crazy these prices were going up. I won't talk too much about what happens, because again, for people that don't know, I don't want to give any spoilers away at all with any of my reviews, but it shows you the mechanics of how the tulip trading took place, because obviously traditional trading would be done with a stockbroker and the New York Stock Exchange, for instance. But obviously in the 1700s things were quite different, and it was actually quite satisfying and pleasant to see how things were done back in the day. So I found it very interesting to see how the mechanics of how it all worked, who looks after the tulips, you know. Obviously again, if you were trading with gold and silver, for instance, in today's era, then there would be somebody who would look after the gold and the silver. So equally with the tulips, you have the same kind of concern. Who looks after the tulips? How are they taken care of? You know, you get your certificates just like you would with a certificate of gold, which is kind of how money started. You have your gold in the bank, and then the banker essentially gives you a certificate that says, yes, we hold, you know, £5 worth of your gold, for instance, and they give you a piece of paper, which today we know of it as being called a £5 note, for instance. So yeah, it's fascinating for me. Like I say, my background is accounting, economics, finance. So I find all this stuff incredibly fascinating. I love a movie that teaches you something, something true, something factual. While I'm not suggesting this movie was supposed to be entirely factual upon how the tulip trade took place, I knew nothing about how it would happen, and this movie certainly makes me now feel like I understand how it would have taken place, how the craze would have come about. Very interesting, incredible really, and for that reason I would probably enjoy watching the movie again. Do you need to go to the cinema to watch it? Now, absolutely not, let's be honest. I mean, it's a rom-com, there's no huge action scenes in it, no spoiler there, you wouldn't expect it to be, I'm sure. So this is absolutely the kind of movie that you can just watch at home on DVD, even on a small screen. I wouldn't even say you have to have a big screen at home for it, but quite a rather enjoyable movie. Yeah, I'm not going to say blokes are going to be particularly into the movie. I don't know how it would sit with women either, to be honest, but for me, what I liked about it was it had the economics, the finance regarding the tulip mania, and the story was certainly quite different. The way it played out had some twists and some turns and not what you expect, and overall the love side of it was decent, and I was very intrigued by the tulip mania side of things as well. So from that point of view, I really quite enjoyed the movie. If you like the kind of movie where you have love stories that entwine with each other and go off on tangents and surprise you as they develop, then you'll probably like this kind of movie as well. So like I say, I think it's a 7.3 out of 10. It's above average. It was decent, perfectly acceptable just to watch at home though on DVD. However, if like me you have the Cineworld pass, sure, get yourself to the cinema, go and see it. I can't imagine it's going to be around for long. This cinema screening, there was 2 other people, there was a couple sat in the screen and me, that was it. So there was 3 people, including myself, watching this movie. And the next film that I went to see that day, the screening was practically packed. So it's not like people weren't out that day. It was just that I don't think this is a particularly popular movie. So if you want to see it at the cinema, go see it quickly, but I don't think it'll be around for long. But it was decent. I enjoyed it a hell of a lot more than I expected, that's for sure. I enjoyed it a lot more than I expected. So let me know what you think. Give it a watch. If you're a Cineworld member, definitely get yourself out to see it. It's definitely worth a watch. And let me know what you thought. Did you enjoy the tulip mania side of it? And what do you think about this crazy tulip mania-ness? I mean, buying tulips for these life-changing amounts of money, absolutely incredible. I mean, it's just crazy, really, when you think, what people will do, and a historical snapshot of people's psyche towards investing. It's absolutely fascinating. Real get-rich-quick mentality, but also it shows you how some of the more entrepreneurial and some of the more desperate even characters were able to take advantage, or at least to try and take advantage. So yeah, enjoyable from from an economic point of view, and the story was entirely decent, and the characters, the actors played very well, and yeah, it wasn't seedy. It was very, very well written and very well acted, I would say. So yeah, overall 7.3. Let me know what you think. Quite a decent film.